Welcome. Welcome to West Basin Municipal Water District Water Planning and Legislation Committee meeting. Um, I believe we have a quorum. I'm calling the meeting to order. And Mr. General Manager, do we have a quorum? Can you please call the roll?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Director Don Deere. Here. Director Gloria Gray.
Here.
Director Scott Houston. Director Harold Williams. Here. Director Desi Alvarez. Madam Chair, we have a quorum.
Thank you very much. Can you go to the next item? Is it public comment, please?
Madam Chair, we have not received any requests for public comment, though this meeting is being held both in person and virtually. If there's any member of the public that would like to speak, please indicate so by raising your virtual hand. Madam Chair, I do not see a request for public comment.
All right, the next item, please.
Madam Chair, that brings us to our presentations, and staff has no presentations. Next item is item 5. It's an action calendar, and staff has no action items included. And that finally brings us to number 6, our information calendar. And item 6.1 is our state and federal legislative updates for the month of November 2024. And for this presentation, we have Matt Vey, our Manager of Water Policy and Resources Development.
Thank you, EJ, and good afternoon, Chairwoman Gray and directors. The monthly state and federal legislative update begins on page 3 of the agenda packet, and I'll begin with the state legislative update, which can be found on page 5 of the packet. As you know, and as you heard, our state advocacy team, Neomela Pappas, provided a great summary of last month's election at the last board meeting. So I'll just cover a few updates that have come through since then. In California, approximately 70% of registered voters ended up voting in the election. For those who voted, nearly 59% voted for Kamala Harris, with about 38% voting for President-elect Trump. This was down from the 64% who voted for President Biden in 2020. For the next California legislative session, there looks to be 31 new members coming on board, with 5 assembly members moving to the Senate, making for a total of 36 open seats. There will also be 2 special elections that are expected to be held sometime in 2025 to fill those vacancies. While Republicans made some minor gains in each of the state houses, Democrats will continue to command a supermajority, albeit a reduced supermajority. It certainly remains to be seen if a smaller majority will impact anything at the state level in this next session. An updated Assembly and Senate partisan makeup summary is included on the second page of the NPA report, which is page 6 of the agenda packet. In the West Basin Service Area delegation, we will have 1 new representative, with Laura Richardson edging out Michelle Chambers by about 2,700 votes for the Senate District 35 seat vacated by Senator Bradford. I believe we also mentioned this last month, but LA County Measure G, which expands the LA County Board of Supervisors from 5 members to 9, successfully passed the ballot, with about 51% of voters supporting the measure. Measure G will also make the county administrative officer the CEO of their agency, an elected position instead of appointed. This will happen in the coming years and won't be an immediate change. We're also now about 2 weeks into the 2025-2026 legislative session, with all new members having been sworn in earlier this month. At the same time, the legislature has kicked off a special session aimed at proactively protecting California against potential Trump administration policies that could go against California's values and priorities. As part of the special session, 2 bills have been introduced so far: Assembly Bill X1-1 and Assembly Bill X1-2, which together would set aside up to $25 million for funding potential litigation costs, with $500,000 of that being immediately allocated for initial case preparation. We also expect to see less bill introductions overall this year, as this year each member of both the Senate and the Assembly will be limited to 35 bills, which is down from 50 in the Assembly and 40 in the Senate. So fewer bills to wade through, although there'll still be plenty. Both houses of the legislature have spoken of their intent to focus on affordability and lowering costs for families, social justice solutions, lowering energy costs, and supporting small businesses. Legislators are currently out of the Capitol and in their districts until January 6th, with the first major legislative deadline coming up on February 21st, which is the deadline to introduce new bills. So we'll have a couple of months to introduce new bills. Following last year, in which there was a significant budget deficit that had to be addressed and resolved, the beginning of this next year, at least for the time being, looks to be much less dire. There's still some economic indicators that could be better, but all in all, it appears there's essentially a balanced budget going into 2025 with a $2 billion budget deficit being projected at this time. That said, future revenue generation is expected to lag behind projected spending, and double-digit deficits could return again in future years without further intervention by the legislature. With that in mind, I think we'll continue to see some of that same fiscal restraint that the legislature had this year with some of their bills, with any potential legislation with significant financial impacts being highly scrutinized by the Newsom administration. Governor Newsom will have until January 10th to submit his budget proposal for the upcoming fiscal year to the legislature. And then moving on to other issues, Governor Newsom has been making the rounds throughout the state to promote jobs, which has included a water infrastructure component. This has included promoting the proposed Delta Conveyance Project and the proposed Sites Reservoir Project. I think that Tammy will likely get into this with her report, but as you know, the Metropolitan Board of Directors last week voted to provide additional funding for the next phase of the Delta Conveyance Project. The board approved $142 million in funding. However, $75 million, or about half of that, is expected to be offset by state water project credits provided by DWR. In addition to these major water infrastructure projects, Governor Newsom is also pushing groundwater recharge, sustainable agriculture practices, a wide-ranging infrastructure plan, and comprehensive job creation and economic development. Additional information regarding these efforts can be found on page 7 of the agenda packet. Also, as part of this month's report, NPA put together a nice summary of Proposition 4, which is the climate resiliency bond that California voters passed with an approval rate of approximately 60%. This is the measure that this board took a support position on as well. I won't rehash everything in the report, but I will note that the actual disbursement of funds could occur sometime as early as 2025, but it'll be up to the various administrative bodies, including State Water Board, Department of Water Resources, to put those funding programs into place. Additionally, at least 40% of bond money must be used for activities that directly benefit communities that have lower incomes or are more vulnerable to the impacts of climate change. And as you know, West Basin is an organization with 30 to 40% of our customers living in those types of areas. This could improve our chances or ability to access future Prop 4 funding streams. In the NPA report, it also identifies which agencies will be tasked with managing each set of funds. For instance, the State Water Board will administer the nearly $400 million in water recycling funds, which we'll have an eye at. And then also DWR will administer the $75 million that's been allocated for conservation efforts. I also want to remind this committee that NPA put together a new member catalog and flashcards that staff has shared with directors in the past couple of weeks. It's a useful guide to the new representatives across the entire state, with only one new member being included in our delegation. But please let staff know if you need us to resend either of those toolkits. Finally, I want to mention that staff is working with NPA to plan for its upcoming spring 2025 Advocacy Day in Sacramento. Staff is putting together an updated briefing book, evaluating any potential Legislator of the Year awardees, and updating our legislative principles and priorities, which we'll present at this committee next month. At this time, staff is working with NPA to consider 2 potential weeks in late February and early March. And we'll be working with the GM and the board secretary to communicate those dates to the board of directors for any preferences that they might have for those trips. Once we get that date locked in, NPA will begin reaching out to our legislative delegation, to other legislative offices that we might want to meet with, and any administration offices that we also may want to meet with. That concludes this month's state legislative report. Are there any questions before I move over to the federal update?
Thank you, Matt. Director Deere?
But what's former Senator Bradford doing now?
That's a good question. I don't actually know what his
Is
next.
he lobbying or?
I have not heard, but we'll look into that and let you know.
Thank you.
I don't know.
All right.
That's all I have.
Director Williams?
No, thank
Director
you.
Williams?
No, thank you.
Matt. All right, thank you very much. Matt, can you please move on? Thank you for that report. Move on to the state report.
Thank you, Chairwoman Gray. The Van Scoyoc Associates Monthly Federal Report begins on packet page 10 of the agenda. And in the November Federal Affairs Report, there were multiple House and Senate races still outstanding last month when we reported. So we'll be providing an update on some of those results. The Republicans flipped 4 seats in the Senate, which will allow them to have governing control of the upper chamber by a 53 to 47 majority. On the House side, they'll hold a much slimmer, currently 220 to 215 seat majority in the next Congress. And that's even less than it was, had been of recent. The early months of the new Congress will also be complicated for House Republican leadership due to some turnover, with some representatives resigning and others being selected for service in the new Trump administration. So to summarize, this means that the House Republican majority will actually be even narrower, so somewhere in the neighborhood of 217 to 215 during the first 3 months of the new Congress and before any special elections have been held. So it kind of remains to be seen what policies might move forward early on in President Trump's tenure. The current Congress is aiming to wrap up all their major unfinished items by the end of this week. In the final weeks of what is a lame duck session of this Congress, lawmakers are attempting to pass several legislative priorities that includes another short-term continuing resolution to fund the government on a temporary basis in FY25, a $100 billion disaster relief package, an FY25 National Defense Authorization Act, and more applicable to the water industry, the Water Resources Development Act, or WRDA, of 2024. Regarding the continuing resolution, Congress is moving to pass another short-term resolution to keep the government operating at current levels due to the incoming administration's preference to finalize the 12 FY25 appropriations bills early next year, which will allow the new administration and Congress to shape those key budgetary spending bills. I also want to note that Senator Adam Schiff was sworn into the Senate early as California's now junior U.S. Senator on December 9th by Vice President Harris. The Burbank Democrat will serve out the remaining term of the late Dianne Feinstein after winning a special election for the unexpired term. And then in January, his full-time full 6-year tenure will begin. Schiff, as you know, who served 23 years in the House, rose to prominence as one of Trump's most outspoken critics, leading the first impeachment trial in 2020 and serving on the committee that investigated the January 6th Capitol riots by Trump supporters. The new senator replaces LaFonza Butler, who was appointed after Senator Dianne Feinstein's death in September 2023, but Senator Butler did not seek to keep the seat. Senator Schiff will be succeeded in the House next month by Democrat Laura Friedman, a former Assembly member, and Glendale Mayer. And as the directors may recall, last year, staff for then House member Schiff visited ECL for a briefing and tour, and our goal is very much to continue to serve as a resource in the water space for his office going forward. The Bureau of Rec recently announced $125 million for investing in large-scale water recycling, which is round 2 of that program. On November 18th, the Bureau announced 125 for 5 projects in California and Utah that will help create new sources of water and improve drought resiliency. These are support the department's new large-scale water recycling program, which was created as part of the bipartisan infrastructure law of 2021. This new program incentivizes conservation projects at a larger scale than normal and will play an important role in helping communities to develop local drought-resistant water supplies by turning unusable water sources into clean and reliable ones. These awards include $26 million to the Metropolitan Water District for its Pure Water Southern California project, which is estimated to produce 120,000 acre feet annually. $30 million for the Los Angeles Groundwater Replenishment Project, which will produce about 26,000 acre feet annually. $60 million for the City of Ventura's water program, and then also $10 million for the Inland Empire Utilities Agency for advanced treatment of recycled water to enhance the Chino Basin Resiliency Project. The second round of large-scale water recycling grant dollars builds upon the first funding round, in which Metropolitan's Pure Water SoCal project received $99 million. The next item to report is the WRDA 2024 conference agreement heads to the president's desk. During the week of December 9th, both the House and Senate passed the Water Resources Development Act of 2024. This bipartisan bill authorizes new ports, waterways, flood protection, and ecosystem restoration around the country, while making a number of policy changes at the Army Corps of Engineers. The measure would authorize the Army Corps to start some new projects, another water-related project estimated to cost about $17 billion in total. There'll also be 200 new feasibility studies for new projects and project modifications, and would authorize the Army Corps to provide assistance to more than 190 new projects related to environmental infrastructure and resource protection. These initiatives fall under the same category type as West Basin's Harbor South Bay Army Corps of Engineers authorization. Moving on, additionally, the conference agreement includes language championed by retiring Congresswoman Grace Napolitano, authorizing the Army Corps to utilize its water supply related authorities to give full consideration of water supply projects, water conservation, and drought resiliency. She had introduced a bill this last year that we were in support of that would have done that. It didn't end up making its way through, but it does appear to have kind of worked its way into this WRDA process, which is good. Next, there's some good information in the BSA report regarding some of the incoming Trump administration cabinet and staffing selections, but I'll highlight just a couple of picks with water-related importance. So Trump tapped a former Republican U.S. House representative from the Long Island of New York named Lee Zeldin to head the EPA. Among other things, he was one of a handful of Republicans to support legislation calling for the EPA to take greater regulatory action to address PFAS. For the Department of Interior, which includes the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation, Trump selected North Dakota Governor Doug Burgum. Burgum has a long record of support for expanding domestic oil and gas production. And besides those, there's been no indication yet who President-elect Trump may nominate for other top posts, including the Assistant Secretary of Water and Science at the Department of the Interior or the next Bureau of Rec Commissioner. As for the Colorado River, with the recent annual Colorado River Water Users Association conference, there's been increased media coverage surrounding the ongoing negotiations between the upper and lower basin states. While the opposite sides seem to be speaking to an intent to compromise on this, they also recognize the need to prepare for a potentially protracted legal battle in the years ahead. A series of multi-state agreements that govern the Colorado River, including which states must take reductions in their flows when water supplies are low, will expire at the end of 2026, so in a couple of years. Tensions between the 7 states came to light at the annual conference in Vegas, as representatives from the different states thought to showcase competing plans that would decide which states must take less water in future years from the waterway. Folks from both basins and at the state and federal levels are worried that a major lawsuit could prohibit progress toward resolution of a plan that would guide the management of the river in future years. And despite a quickly approaching 2026 deadline, state reps are standing firm on their positions at this time, meaning that any final deal may not be satisfactory enough to all parties to avoid that litigation. Final decisions on the Colorado River will be made during the incoming administration, although many people believe that the changing political landscape will not necessarily affect the politics of the Colorado River. Work will continue into 2025, and there's little doubt that some progress will need to be made in the next 12 months to give all stakeholders of Colorado River a chance to come to an agreement prior to the deadline. And then finally, as with our state lobbying trip, staff is also working with our Washington DC staff to plan for the district's 2025 advocacy trip to Washington DC. With the state, we'll provide some potential weeks that we could visit the nation's capital. That will be communicated with the board secretary to the directors, and we'll continue to have the discussion over the next month. And once again, once that date gets locked in, BSA will begin reaching out to our legislative and administrative partners that we want to meet with while we're there. That concludes my federal update. However, additional information is available in the monthly BSA report that I encourage you to read through. Thank you, and please let me know if you have any questions.
Okay, thank you, Matt. Director, are there any questions?
No, thank you.
Director Williams?
No, thank you.
I thank you, Matt, for both those thorough reports. The next item, please.
Yes, Madam Chair, the next item is item 6.2. It's our monthly Metropolitan Water District update. And for this presentation, we have Tammy Hurley-High, a water policy and resources analyst.
Thank you, Jane. Good afternoon, Chair Gray, Member Deere, and Director Williams. So this information is update on current programs that are and activities that are happening at Metropolitan Water District. And we have, it begins on page 17 of the committee packet. And included are some PowerPoint slides that begin on page 31, just to help guide along the update on the report. So first off is the reverse cyclic program. Metropolitan, their board authorized the general manager to enter into reverse cyclic program agreements. This will allow member agencies to prepay for water deliveries of up to 100,000 acre feet during a limited term over calendar year 2024 and 2025. And all member agencies are eligible to participate in the program. When this modified program, Metropolitan will not certify storage issues for taking delivery. This had previously served as a barrier for some agency to participate. So this program is eligible for all member agencies. And this will help increase revenue during the current biennium for Metropolitan to help meet their revenue target by allowing member agencies to pre-purchase this water at the full service rate that is currently in effect. So yeah, as you know, Metropolitan is experiencing low water sales during the overall cooler weather and member agency constraints such as limited capacity due to refilling their replenishment basins. So with this program being able now to provide Metropolitan with positive net revenues in the current biennium budget, it will help the board achieve the board directive to generate up to $60 million in new one-time revenues during this current budget cycle. The next slide, please. So with respect to the Public Works construction contract for proposed legislation, the board did authorize staff to sponsor legislation to increase the minimum threshold for competitive bidding on public work construction contracts from $25,000 up to $150,000, and to also seek an inclusion of a inflation escalator. These cost savings would be realized by avoiding administrative fees associated with electronic bidding and staff that needed for preparation of minor public works solicitations. The increased threshold would allow for more time and cost-effective public works contracting for small contracts under $150,000, and the staff time and other expenditures currently required to prepare and solicit bids for the construction contract. And if we can go to the next slide. So this is just a brief update on certified assessed valuations. As you know, each year in August, Metropolitan staff reports the assessed valuation to the board for the upcoming fiscal year. However, in November, the San Diego Local Agency Formation Commission finalized that the annexation of Rainbow Municipal Water District from the San Diego County Water Authority and annexation into Eastern Municipal Water District service area. The transfer results in a 0.17% addition to Eastern Municipal Water District assessed valuation and an equivalent reduction from San Diego's assessed valuation. So as a result, the reorganization is effective at Metropolitan for all of their district purposes, including the assessed valuation for each impacted member agency for the purposes of the participation, the voting, and the director entitlement. So this is a very minimal impact on assessed valuation percentages for both San Diego and Rainbow service area. And it does not impact any other director entitlement for any other agency. Can you go to the next slide, please? Thank you. So with respect to the Delta Conveyance project, the board voted to approve providing additional funding for planning costs for the Delta Conveyance project. Earlier this year, DWR had indicated to all of the state water contractors that additional funding was needed for pre-construction work through 2027 of approximately $300 million. And Metropolitan's share of these costs is 47.2%, and that equates to $141.6 million. So this funding will allow DWR to continue planning and design for the project, since the new proposed alignment is different from the previous design studies. And these activities will be used to prepare an updated cost estimate and project benefit analysis. It is anticipated that Metropolitan, their board, will consider commitment to participate in this project for future support in 2027. And so by that time, DWR can complete the necessary permitting, the design, and the engineering work that is necessary. Can you go to the next slide, please? So previously in October, the board had directed staff to send correspondence to the Department of Water Resources to ask several important questions that are related to the permitting, the funding, and the financing. Included in that correspondence, Metropolitan also raised other concerns over outstanding financial claims that they currently have with DWR. And pending resolve of the financial claims, DWR will be refunding Metropolitan up to $75 million, which is what Matt had mentioned earlier during his debate. So that refund will help Metropolitan. It will help offset Metropolitan's impact of DWR's request for the additional funding needed at this time. If we can go to the next slide, please. So regarding Pure Water Southern California program, Metropolitan was recently notified by the Bureau of Reclamation of additional funding award for $26.2 million. And this is in addition to the $99.2 million that Reclamation had already mentioned to Metropolitan earlier this year. Last year, in November 2023, Metropolitan and the Los Angeles County Sanitation Districts applied for a $125 million grant to help fund the planning and design activities for this project. And Reclamation did initially notify Metropolitan that their application was approved for funding award of $99 million. So in May of 2024, Metropolitan applied for another grant, that time for approximately $26 million, which was the amount that was not awarded earlier in the other application, in the initial application. So now these federal funds will help advance planning and design work and improvement to the existing infrastructure that is needed for the project. And Metropolitan and the sanitation districts are in the process of drafting the project's environmental impact report which they expect to make available for the public review next year in 2025. So yeah, last month, at the last board meeting, the general manager approved, or the board authorized the general manager to enter into an agreement with Reclamation to accept these grant funds. And then Metropolitan staff will return to the board to appropriate the federal funds into their budget as they receive it. And next slide, please. So with respect to the board agenda, look ahead, when this report was prepared, there's a few items that, we are closely monitoring. So first is the Pure Water Southern California project, the grant funding, as I had just mentioned. Another item that the board approved was to authorize the general manager to enter into agreement with Reclamation to implement phase 2 of the Lower Colorado River Basin System Conservation and Efficiency Program. Under these agreements, Reclamation would pay for conserved water generated from Metropolitan Turf Replacement Program and the Antelope Valley East Kern Desert Water Bank. Reclamation will also pay Metropolitan for design and construction of the Antelope Valley East Kern Desert Water Bank facility. And then in addition to that, to encourage an increase of the turf replacement participation, Metropolitan would increase the turf rebate to $4 per square foot of replaced turf. Of that $4 per square foot, Metropolitan would contribute $1 per square foot, and Reclamation would contribute $3. So more information on that program will be brought to you for your information next month. And then another item was the board authorized the general manager to enter into an amended agreement with DWR for that pre-construction work planned during 26-27 for the Delta Conveyance Project, as I mentioned earlier. And then another item that they took up last meeting was the board adopted the legislative priorities and principles for 2025. And more information on that will be provided to you next month as well. We can go to the next slide, please. So here's the chart that we showed you for the water supply conditions. These, as you know, are graphics that Metropolitan maintains on a regular basis. So the state water project supplies on the top row, the middle row shows the supply from Colorado River, and the bottom row are supplied from Metropolitan's local reservoirs. At the time this report was prepared, these graphics were updates on conditions as of November 14th. And as you may recall, there were late storms that happened in November that arrived, and then they still had recent storms last week, and there's more coming. So this is really, it's really helped the water supply conditions for the state. And so we have, improved conditions is what we're seeing here today. So for example, the State Water Project, the 8 station rain index on this graph is showing the cumulative precipitation total to be 48% of normal. However, the current readings are indicating the precipitation total as 129% of normal. So it's a very nice improvement in just a few weeks. Similarly, for Lake Oroville, the graph shows the reservoir storage to be 48% of its capacity. However, now the current reservoir storage is at 56% capacity. So Lake Oroville elevation rose by 28 feet after the late November storm and increased the storage volume by 280,000 acre feet. The Northern Sierra precipitation and snowpack are still increasing because of the storms last week, in addition to other storms approaching, as I had mentioned. And for the Colorado River Basin, snow and rain conditions are showing above average. For Diamond Valley Lake, which is Metropolitan's emergency storage reservoir, the storage volume is 786,000 acre feet and is at 97% capacity. So I'll conclude with that. In conclusion, Metropolitan has ended the year with a record high storage supply of 3.8 million acre feet in their dry level reserve. So thank you for this opportunity, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Tammy. Thanks for that report. Director Deere, question?
No, thank you.
Director Williams?
No, thank you.
Thank you, Tammy. Next item, please.
Madam Chair, that brings us to closed session, and there are no closed session items, which prior to adjournment, the next item is director's comments and future agenda items.
Director Williams and Director Deere, any comments, please?
None here, thank you.
No, thank you.
All right. My comments, thank you to staff for all your reports this morning. Thank you to everyone, board members. Is the next item adjournment?
That's correct.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Thank you. This meeting is adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye.